This is lesson 402 in the Byzantine Empire. Got an important note here about the slides if you're looking at those. To view the slides in Google Classroom, you need to open a new window and choose Google Slides as the format. Otherwise, the animations on those slides will not work. So here's our essential question. What is the significance of the Byzantine Empire? How did the Franks and the Byzantines build on the success of Christianity and the legacies of Rome? So let's just review real fast what happened to the Roman Empire in the year 476 CE and what was leading up to that. Let's review this fall of the Roman Empire. After the Pax Romana, the Roman Empire entered into an era of decline. We know this already. One of its many problems was that the Western Romans had a large trade imbalance. In other words, they bought more from other countries than they sold. And when that happens, money leaves the country. Or at least you could say more money leaves the country than comes into the country, and the country becomes impoverished. Rome had a series of weak emperors, like this guy. As Rome went deeper into debt, the military had less money to work with and began cutting costs by using cheaper foreign mercenary soldiers from German tribes who did not have the same loyalty to Rome as real Roman soldiers did. The division of the Roman Empire. The western side of the Roman Empire continued to grow weak. Emperor Diocletian tried to save the Roman Empire by dividing it into two administrative halves to make it more manageable, a Western Roman Empire and an Eastern Roman Empire. And he established a tetrarchy, and of course tetra means four, with himself in the east, a co-emperor Maximian in the west, and a junior Caesar ruling just beneath each of them for a total of 4 rulers. And that was his tetrarchy plan. Later on, the Emperor Constantine ended Diocletian's tetrarchy, went back to ruling the entire empire himself, moved the Roman capital from Rome to the eastern city of Byzantium, and renamed it Constantinople after himself. Finally, the Emperor Theodosius split the empire again permanently by willing the rule of each half to his 2 sons. By the year 476, Germanic and barbarians had completely conquered the western half of the Roman Empire. And the Western Roman Empire fell into what would later be called the Middle Ages or the Dark Ages, and that lasted from about 500 to about 1300 CE. So what happened to the Eastern Roman Empire? While the Western Roman Empire was in decline, the Eastern Roman Empire still remained strong. The Eastern Roman Empire later became what was known as the Byzantine Empire, and it was named that during the Renaissance after this empire had already completely fallen. How did physical geography impact the Byzantine capital of Constantinople? Here's a map of Constantinople, and we can see where it is right there with this arrow. And notice it sticks out on this peninsula right here and is surrounded on 3 sides by water. Constantinople was at a crossroads for trade and business between Europe, Asia, and Africa because of its location. And this massive amount of trade made the Byzantine Empire very wealthy. Constantinople's location on a peninsula connecting the Black Sea and the Mediterranean Sea made it easier to defend from outside invaders than most other cities were. There's another rendering of Constantinople. The Byzantines had many enemies, including Arabs and some Germanic tribes, but they were able to survive. The culture of the Byzantine Empire. The citizens of the Byzantine Empire thought of themselves as Romans. Like I said, the term Byzantine Empire hadn't been invented yet. And they shared some similarities with the Roman Empire. The Byzantines kept Greco-Roman culture alive, while the western side of the Roman Empire was plunged into the Middle Ages. By preserving that Greco-Roman culture, Constantinople became a major center of learning. Schools taught philosophy, medicine, geometry, and Greek and Latin grammar. So Constantinople also featured that Roman-style architecture using arches and using domes. To the left, you have a Roman piece of architecture, and just above, you've got a piece of Byzantine architecture. Note the similarities. Like the Romans, Byzantine cities had forums for business and trade, and they built arenas for entertainment. Below you see what is called a hippodrome, and that was used for chariot races. In fact, here's a picture of chariots racing like crazy in that hippodrome. The most impressive work of Byzantine architecture is the Hagia Sophia, and its name meant holy wisdom in Greek. You can also call that the Hagia Sophia if you want to. It was originally a Christian church. Here's the inside. And later the Hagia Sophia became an Islamic mosque, and today it's a museum in present-day Turkey. Though the official language of the Roman Empire was Latin, most people on the eastern side of the Roman Empire spoke Greek. So after the Western Roman Empire fell, Greek naturally became the Byzantines' official language. Both the Roman and the Byzantine empires were ruled by emperors who had absolute power over their empires. So their governments were what we would call absolute monarchies. Of the many emperors that the Byzantines had, the Emperor Justinian was the most famous. About 50 years after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, Justinian came to power in the East, in the Eastern Roman Empire, and he began trying to reconquer Roman territories that had been lost to those Germanic barbarian tribes like the Visigoths, the Franks, and the Vandals, and the Ostrogoths, as well as to the Huns from Central Asia who had chased the Germanic tribes into Roman territory in the first place. And so on this map, you see in the orange old Roman territory that Justinian added to Byzantine territory. And this was a very short-lived victory. The Byzantine Empire re-lost this territory fairly quickly. And in the purple, you see the Byzantine Empire as it was when Justinian rose to power. In addition to empire building, what else did the Emperor Justinian value? The Justinian Code. To oversee his empire, Justinian ordered a large number of legal experts to consolidate Roman laws, legal opinions, court decisions, etc., into a single law code. The result of their efforts was called the Justinian Code, and it served as the legal basis for criminal justice, marriage, property, slavery, and women's rights. This law code, the Justinian Code, served as the basis for law for the next 900 years, and was one of the most important legacies of the Byzantine Empire. So here's how the Justinian Code broke down. The Justinian Code had four main components. First, there was the law code, and that consisted of the nearly 5,000 Roman laws that the Byzantines still considered useful. Next, in the code, you had the digest. And what the digest did for you was it summarized Romans' opinions about the various laws in the law code. So that was very informative towards understanding the reasons behind and the applications of those 5,000 Roman laws that were in the law code. Then below that, it had the institutes, and that was basically a textbook on how to use this Justinian Code. In other words, it was the directions, basically. And then finally, you had the novella, the new laws. And the new laws contained all the laws that were passed after the year 534, when this Justinian Code was initially compiled. Justinian's building projects. Justinian ordered the start of many massive building projects, including the Hagia Sophia, to show the importance of the church. Justinian built hospitals, he built aqueducts, public baths, and courts. The Empress Theodora, Justinian's wife, the Empress Theodora, had a lot of power and a lot of influence in the Byzantine Empire. She dealt with foreign leaders, meeting with them and writing to them. And she helped her husband pass new laws, and she advised him in matters dealing with other nations. Theodora encouraged the building of Christian churches and cathedrals. Theodora was a woman of great beauty, and she did many things to help her husband, Justinian, but she had a dark side to her. Theodora fiercely guarded her husband's regime and her own personal power, ruthlessly ordering murders of those she thought were enemies. And when a rebellion broke out against Justinian, the Nika riots, she sent the army in to slaughter 30,000 people. The Nika riots of 532 lasted over a week. Here's a picture of Justinian and Theodora inspecting the carnage afterward, after this riot was put down. Justinian is remembered as one of the Byzantine Empire's greatest emperors, while his wife, Theodora, is remembered as one of the most notorious women in history, which is a rather misogynistic way of looking at things. It's pretty much biased against women, which happens a lot in history. Nevertheless, Justinian and Theodora's partnership worked, and the Byzantine Empire mostly thrived under their rule. Here's another essential question which we'll get into later. Why did the Christian church split into Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox denominations? Religion of the Byzantine Empire. How was religion similar between East and West? In the West, you have the Roman religion, or what you would call the Catholic religion. In the East, you have the Byzantine religion, or what you would call the Eastern Orthodox religion. Because of its location close to Judea, where Christianity started, most Byzantines had converted to Christianity before people in the Western Roman Empire did.